Hello, welcome to the Inspirante Education Podcast, where we discuss different topics pertaining to education and career goals, including interviews with different people and discussions about different events occurring in the world today. My name is Aadit Sangwan. I am a rising junior at Limerick High School with a strong passion for business and design. I am part of Limerick's business club DECA and I'm comfortable coding in Java and Python. I'm also a part of Boy Scouts and enjoy learning new things along with spreading my knowledge to others. Hello, my name is Aadit Sangwan and welcome to the Inspirante podcast. Today, our guest is from MIT, where he majored in electrical engineering and computer science. A graduate from the class of 2018, Tavish Smith. At MIT, he played volleyball, where he was a UVC All-Academic Player from 2016 to 2018 and was a UVC All-Conference Honorable Mention in 2017 and 2018. Tavish went to La Costa Canyon High School in Southern California as part of the class of 2012. Currently, he works at Oliver Wyman. Welcome, Tavish. Glad to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, so how's your quarantine been going so far?
Oh, it's going all right. Yeah, can't complain. Staying healthy, so that's the most important thing. What about you?
It's been fine for me as well, just doing lots of work.
Classic, yeah.
Yep. All right, so you majored in electrical engineering and computer science, correct?
Yeah, so at MIT, computer science and electrical engineering are a combined program. It's called Course 6, and there's a few different uh, kind of sub courses within that majors that you can do. Originally, it was only 6-1, 6-2, and 6-3. They've since expanded to 6-7 and 6-9, but essentially what that means is 6-1 is almost all electrical engineering. 6-2 is a pretty good combination of electrical and computer science. 6-3 is primarily computer science. 6-7 is computational biology, I think, and 6-9 is computational neuro or something. I'm not sure. But I was 6-3, so I was primarily computer science with a little bit of electrical engineering sprinkled in.
All right, that's pretty cool. At what age did you start gaining interest in these topics?
At what age did I begin gaining interest in computer science, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say I had been interested in computers since I was young. I never played around with programming or anything like that until getting to college, actually. But I'd done a lot of computer game playing and then creating some mods and things for those games and just kind of browsing forums, watching tutorials and things of, how to upgrade computers. I built my own desktop when I was in high school. So I was always kind of interested in computers, but I never really got formally into doing any programming or coding or anything like that until I got to college.
All right, I guess that explains more of the electrical engineering aspect of your major.
Yeah, a little bit.
All right, so how do you feel your experience at MIT with it being such a prestigious school? How do you feel the experience was different than if you went to another college?
Good question. It's hard to say, obviously, because I went to MIT, I didn't go anywhere else, so I'm not sure how directly I can compare. I think MIT has certain advantages, like many other schools, and it's up to the student to take advantage of those opportunities and things. I think no matter what school you go to, you can make the most of it, and it's all going to come down to getting out of it what you want to get out of it. So MIT put me in a great position to get an education that I really enjoyed and learn a lot of skills that now I'm able to apply in my career. So I really enjoyed it.
All right, at MIT, one thing you did there was play volleyball. How did you balance playing sports at a high level with your academic life at MIT?
Yeah, so I would say uh, volleyball at MIT is Division 3, so it's not as competitive as, like, say, a Division 1 program at Princeton or some of the other programs I was looking at. And I purposely chose that because I was worried, like you just mentioned, about being able to balance sports and academics. I wanted to go somewhere where there was still a high level of play and I could enjoy it. But primarily, I was going to school for academics. And so I wanted to make sure I had time to be able to focus on that, especially somewhere like MIT. where you have a lot of students coming from, Phillips Academy or a lot of these prestigious boarding schools and the like. I already was at kind of a disadvantage coming from a public school and not being super into programming from when I was 3 years old, like a lot of the other kids. But I think in reality, it ended up, uh, well, at times I felt like I was really busy because of practice every day or tournaments on the weekends or games during the week, things like that. In reality, it provided a very important mental break for me, time for me to kind of pull myself away from classes and studies and to be able to de-stress, get some exercise, build social bonds and friendships with my teammates, and be competitive as well. So I think it was really important for me to have that, because I think school can be a little overwhelming if you don't have some sort of outlet.
Yeah, I completely understand. So when playing competitive volleyball at a Division 3 level, which is still competitive, I presume, what are some things you learned while playing?
What did I learn? Hmm. I think I learned a lot of things. We went through a coaching change during my last year. So our head coach actually retired and we had to find a new coach. So that was a really interesting experience. As the captain of the team, I was in charge of our preseason. So before the official season starts, when you're allowed to practice with your coach, a lot of teams will do preseason practices, which are called like captain's practices, because the coach isn't actually allowed to be there per NCAA regulations since it's before the season starts. But a lot of teams will have these practices to kind of get things up to speed before kicking off the real season. So I was in charge of planning all those practices, making sure everyone showed up, even though they were busy with all their other commitments in school and everything like that. And then also helping find the new coach. So it was a very interesting experience. It taught me a lot about managing expectations well and motivating people, whether those are your teammates and getting them to show up on time or whatever it might be, or whether it's motivating the administration to search a little bit harder and put out some additional feelers to see if there's any other coaches out there who might be a better fit, things like that. So I would say a lot of what the volleyball program taught me was uh, relationships with others, both in a formal and a non-formal environment.
All right, so you mentioned you were captain of the volleyball team. Was this your first time experiencing leadership, or did you have any prior experience leading anything?
Yeah, I would say I experienced leadership. I mean, in high school to a certain degree. On my club volleyball team, I was also one of the co-captains, and I had exposure to that. I think it's a little bit different. Every leadership position is going to be different depending on the scope and the role. But I had had experience going into it from extracurriculars and volleyball, as well as some church functions where I was in like volunteer leadership positions as well. So luckily, I felt relatively prepared going into the role.
All right, so let's move on to some extracurriculars. A common extracurricular that many boys do is Boy Scouts. So you achieved the rank of Eagle Scout, the highest rank there. What are some things you learned through scouting? And this is helpful for me as I'm a life scout currently.
Oh, great, great. Do you have your Eagle project lined up or anything yet? Or
Well, I had an Eagle project, but then COVID-19 came, so I had to cancel all of my plans for it.
oh no, that's
Yeah.
that's terrible. Yeah, definitely throws a wrench in the plans. I'm sure you'll get there though. Just gotta persevere. Yeah, I love scouting personally. My dad was one of the assistant scoutmasters for a little bit when I was a kid. So I started scouts when I was 12, I think. And it was a long time ago now, but I think when I was 12, or maybe we did Weeblos or something like that. I remember doing Cub Scouts before that. Always a lot of fun. I loved camping, outdoor activities. It was a lot of just my tight group of friends who were in the scout troop with me. So it was great to have another excuse to get to spend time with them doing fun activities. But I would say scouting taught me a lot, obviously, in terms of like physical hands-on skills like tying knots or how to pitch a tent or wilderness survival type stuff. But it also taught me a lot about taking care of the environment and leaving campsites better than when you found them, and being respectful of the nature and the natural resources that we have, which I think was important. I was lucky to grow up in California, so there's a lot of great state parks and other natural resources, great campsites and things like that. So always really enjoyed it. I think my Eagle project too showed me that you don't have to have a lot of money or a lot of power or even know people in order to make a difference in your community. And it can start with something really small, and that's fine. That's all it takes to start having an impact and to really be able to change people's lives. So no effort is too small when it comes to helping others in your community.
Oh, what exactly did you do for your Eagle project?
Yeah, so my Eagle project was building raised planter beds for disabled adult care center near my home. So essentially, this facility would take care of disabled adults primarily during the day. It was almost like a daycare center for them to allow the families to have a break, because caring for people with disabilities is very hard work, as you can imagine. So a lot of these adults were in wheelchairs and loved to go garden in the backyard, but it was tough for them to reach over the side of their wheelchair to be able to reach these plants and things on the ground. So what we did was take some big sheets of plywood, some 2x6s, build these raised planter boxes. So essentially the people in the wheelchairs, almost like a table, could roll up underneath it and be able to reach their herbs and their tomatoes and all the other things they were growing at uh, like their waist or chest level. So just essentially accessible gardening implementation, I guess, for this facility near my house.
All right, so one thing I experienced when planning my own Eagle project is that there's a lot of things you have to plan out, like costs, materials, thinking about who's going to come, who's not going to come. How did those things help you in the future? Like, did that experience of the planning of the Eagle project help?
Oh, definitely. I think it's very applicable. I mean, especially now when I think about my work in consulting, you work in teams, you're very rarely on your own. And so it's important, even though sometimes you wish you could do a lot of the things yourself because you'd like to do them your way. It's very important to be able to delegate those tasks to other members of your team and to be able to rely on them and give them the feedback and the help that they need to be able to achieve their goals as well. I think that was something I learned early on in my Eagle project. I think, as you'll probably experience, sometimes it can be a lot easier to just think, oh man, I'll just do this all myself and then I can make sure I get it right. But in reality, that's not going to work in every situation. So being able to delegate and rely on members of your troop, even when they might mess something up or there might be setbacks or they might not show up when they said they were going to, learning to work with volunteers and with a team, I think is a very applicable skill to both your time in university and your career afterwards.
All right, so that's very helpful. So thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so something that I've seen in this past time here, these past years, is that there's a lot of freshmen and sophomores who don't know about scouting in middle school and elementary school, like most of us joined, but they learn about it in freshman and sophomore year. Do you recommend that they join, even though the process to earn Eagle is going to be a lot harder for them?
That's a great question. It's not something I've thought a lot about, to be honest, but I would say my 2 cents on it now is that, you know, like many things, it may be more challenging to join later on and not be kind of an early adopter in that sense. But if you have a good troop and a good support network, I think that's what's most important. And even if the focus isn't necessarily getting live or Eagle Scout, it can be really important to just gain experiences working with your troop, doing some of those fun merit badges, going camping and being able to branch outside of your typical social network. I think scouting allows you to do that, especially with things like scout camps where you're able to meet a very diverse group of people who all have kind of similar goals and interests as you do. So I think it can be rewarding regardless of when you join or what your ultimate goal is to get out of the program, as long as you go into it with a positive attitude and you're willing to be flexible.
Yeah, I feel like that's applicable everywhere. If you go with a positive attitude and you're flexible and willing to do different things, you'll be successful.
Very true.
Okay, so let's jog back in your memory a little bit, back to the high school days. A common decision that many high schoolers face, a dilemma, is that they don't know which standardized test to take, the ACT or the SAT. So, which one did you personally take, and why did you choose that specific test?
Another interesting question. So I took the PSAT in high school. I think we were required to. I remember doing pretty well on it and thinking, okay, I'll just take the SAT, because at the time that was kind of more mainstream while I was in high school. So I took the SAT. I really did not do very well. I mean, I did fine, but not as well as I would have liked. So I thought, okay, I'll try the ACT. Did much better on the ACT. So that's the score that I ended up submitting. So personally, I would say, take one. If it goes well, great. If it doesn't go well, or if, you're curious how you might react to a different test format and a different kind of set of questions, then take both. I mean, if you have the ability to do that and you're in a situation where, financially that's available to you as well, I'd recommend taking both and just seeing what fits your personal testing style better, because that's what I did. And I think it made a big difference for me.
All right, so let's stay around that time period and let's go into the summers of high school. So a lot of students they usually do a summer project, study for school, start college apps or go to summer camp. What did you tend to do during your high school summers?
Great question. I was not really your typical overachiever, I guess, in high school. I didn't do any internships or anything like that. The only exception was actually my senior year after I graduated this summer before I started university. I worked at the Boys and Girls Club as a summer camp counselor. Uh, and that was because it was part of my financial aid package in school. It was like a federal financial aid grant that you could access if you worked at a nonprofit. So I did that to help pay for school. But other than that, during the summers, I just played a lot of volleyball, hung out with friends, and just kind of did what every usual high school kid does, I guess. Went to the beach a lot and spent time with my family.
All right, so you went to MIT, which is a highly prestigious school, very hard to get in, etc., etc. So, what do you think made you stand out from other applicants for the school?
Interesting. Yeah. To be honest, it's all speculation. I don't really know, since I'm not a part of the admissions committee. I'd like to think that uh, personally, uh, I do have a very diverse set of interests and experience. So I think a lot of the time nowadays, especially, it's becoming more and more rare to be able to do many different things. People are becoming more and more specialized. And there's definitely a place for that. There's, people who love computer science. That's all they like in their life. That's all they've done their whole life. And MIT is a great place for them. There's also people like me who like sports, like the arts, like, camping and scouting, also enjoy computers, but also enjoy music and, a variety of other things. And so there's also a place for people like that at MIT. And I think especially as they try to build a more well-rounded class and increase the amount of diversity in their classes, that'll become even more and more important in the years to come. I also had a somewhat unique background because my mother's an opera singer. I was able to travel a lot as a child, following her around the world as she sang. So if I remember correctly, I think quite a few of my essays were about that, about traveling and gaining exposure to other cultures and different ways of thinking, which I guess made enough sense to the admissions committee that they let me in, or made a mistake and let me through anyway. So
Yeah, okay. So, you said your mother was an opera singer, which is really cool. So, did you travel all around the USA or all around the world?
Uh, not quite all around the world, but primarily Europe. So I was born born in New York City. Then we moved to Europe when I was pretty little, primarily Germany, but also a lot around France, Italy, Spain, Portugal, just kind of all over the place. We took a few trips farther out east when my mom was singing in Japan or things like that. And then moved to California to where I live now in 2000. And then from there, spent a lot of time down in South America as well. So Brazil, Argentina, Chile, bouncing around down there. So definitely was very lucky to have that opportunity. It made it tough as a kid to have to go to different schools a lot of the time or to have to leave your friends. But I loved it and wouldn't trade it for anything.
What was the language barrier like when you went to different schools in different countries and places?
It's a great question. It was tough. I think I was lucky in that places where we were more long term. So when I was living in Germany, for example, we were able to attend a British international school. So they still spoke English, albeit it was Queen's English, so a little bit different. I had to learn to throw the rubbish in the bin, and we wore uniforms and used fountain pens and all kinds of fun stuff like that. But luckily, I still spoke the language. I think other places it was definitely a little bit more of a struggle, but when you're completely immersed in the language, it comes much more quickly. I think when you're forced to learn it, you learn much more quickly than when you're just doing it for fun.
All right, that's like a very cool experience that you have that I feel not a lot of other people will ever be able to have. Personally, if it was me, I know I'd be very stressed switching between different schools and having to deal with different language barriers and all that. But that's just me personally. Like it would be very stressful for me to do all this stuff. So
Definitely.
so when applying to all these different colleges, what was the process for you like, and what was your reaction when you got into MIT?
Good question. So as an athlete, it was slightly different than I think the non-athlete admissions process. So a lot of the schools I was looking at primarily to play volleyball. So especially a lot of the Ivy League schools I was looking at, similar to non-Ivies, which have a letter of intent, which is essentially a letter that you sign saying, yes, I will go to this school to play volleyball. And you may or may not get a scholarship. Typically, those who receive letters of intent do get scholarships. But at Ivy Leagues, it's essentially the same thing. They call it a likely letter. So I was juggling that process, meeting with a lot of coaches, going on recruiting trips, but also during those trips, obviously trying to figure out if I liked not only the vibe of the team and the coaching, but also the school itself and what the balance was of academics and volleyball. At MIT, it was actually different. MIT doesn't offer any scholarships, and sports actually plays a very small role in the applications process because sports, obviously, as you may have guessed, are not as popular at MIT as some of these other big powerhouse schools. So I went to MIT on a recruiting trip. I enjoyed it. I just felt like it was a good fit for me. People were very open and cooperative and friendly. I really liked that. But I wasn't sure I would get in. So I had applied to a lot of other schools through the Common App already. And it was like a day or two before the deadline was due for applications. And I actually wasn't going to apply to MIT at all. I was planning on going to Princeton where I already had a likely letter. But my mom just said, no, you should apply. I have a good feeling about it. So I copy pasted some essays from some of my other essays, sent it in, and then was very surprised when I got in. Took another trip back there, had the same feeling, just that it felt comfortable. Like I liked the people and I liked the environment, and ended up choosing to go there.
Was there any schools that you felt had a really bad environment for you, and you definitely did not want to attend that school?
Yeah, I wouldn't say necessarily bad environment as much as just personally it didn't quite mesh with what I was looking for. But I think even at the end, when trying to decide where I wanted to do it, it's a really tough decision. And as a kid, you can feel like at least I felt like I didn't have enough data to base my decision on. I didn't know what would be good for me. At most, I had spent, a few days at some of these schools and talked to people who went there, but I had no idea what was really going to be good for me. So kind of funnily, actually, I had been bugging my parents so much. My mom said, "It's your decision. I'm not going to make it for you. You figure it out. It's your life." And my dad finally got so sick of me asking him that he said, "Well, if you really can't decide, let's just flip a coin." So we flipped a coin 5 times, and it landed on heads 5 times in a row. So I went to MIT.
Yeah, to me, it seems like you definitely made the right choice in MIT.
It worked out fine for me. So I guess the moral of the story is, you're going to have a lot of options, hopefully, and you really can't make a wrong decision no matter where you go.
All right, so I want to go back to the whole volleyball thing real quick.
Sure.
So when did you start learning and when did you start playing volleyball?
Great question. Yeah, I played sports when I was a kid. Growing up, I played pretty much every sport you could. I did t-ball and then little league, and I did soccer, and didn't do football actually very much. I played just a little bit, but pretty much every other sport. Got really into basketball. Was convinced I was going to play basketball throughout high school. I'd been playing club for a few years in middle school, and when I went into high school, I just kind of got burnt out. I think it had been a few years of competitive play at that point, and I was just kind of over it. And my sister played volleyball, said, "Hey, you're tall. This looks fun. Come play volleyball with me." So I tried it out, loved it, really enjoyed it straight from the start, and then played until now and still continue to play. So I would say freshman year of high school, maybe the summer before my freshman year of high school was when I actually first started playing competitively.
Yeah, a common thing I've seen is there are multiple basketball players who also play volleyball. So I think that's because the builds are similar and some like the jumping skills are similar. That might have been a bit lucky for you that you're able to easily transition between the two sports.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, my high school I was going to go to, Rancho Buena Vista High School, that was closest to my house, did not have a men's volleyball program. But I ended up getting an interdistrict transfer to La Costa Canyon High School because they were under enrolled. They didn't have enough students, and Rancho Buena Vista was way over enrolled. And LCC did have a men's volleyball program. So, if I had gone to a different high school, who knows, probably would have never played volleyball and may not have played in college at all either. So, could have turned out very differently. But
All right, yeah. So you went to San Diego. You lived in San Diego, my bad, for high school. When that's like a very sunny place. That's even in the winter, it's like 70ish, 75 degrees. You go surfing and all that. So what was the experience like moving from the warm climate in San Diego to the cold climate of Boston?
yeah, it's it's definitely a change. I mean, like you said, winter in San Diego, we'd go to the beach on Christmas, things like that. And Boston, you're definitely not doing that in the winter. It gets really cold. It gets dark a lot earlier because of how far north Boston is. And to be honest, you're inside so much studying and in the classroom anyway that you don't get outside very much. But I think it has its pros too. It's fun. People would go out and have snowball fights or make snowmen and things. And the fall is extremely beautiful with the leaves changing colors, and you definitely appreciate it more. I think in the spring again too, when everything starts to thaw out and you start to see some trees get leaves on them again, and it really makes you appreciate the warmth that you do have.
Yeah, yeah. So what's one thing that you missed the most from the whole college experience at MIT?
The one thing I miss the most from the experience. Hmm. I would say probably the social aspect. I think, I lived in the dorms, and being able to have all of my friends around all the time, doing the same thing I was doing, a lot of them taking the same classes I was taking, always having these common interests, is something that I miss a lot. Just being able to go next door and see people and see what they were up to and complain together about how hard a piece that was or something like that. I think especially now during COVID, that's become especially apparent. But as you move into careers and as get married or have kids or whatever it is, I think it becomes harder and harder to make time for people, and you're definitely not seeing them every single day like you did in college. So that's that's one thing that I definitely miss.
All right. So, are you still in Boston or did you move back to California, San Diego?
So right now I'm actually in Boston, but I've been bouncing around a little bit because of the whole COVID fiasco. So my actual work office is based in San Francisco.
Oh, that's cool. We're actually located in Bay Area as well.
Oh, great. Yeah. Where are you at?
We're in South Bay, more of the Cupertino, San Jose, West San Jose area.
Okay. Yep. Yep. I lived in East Bay. So, and then I would just commute into the city.
All right. So you currently work at Oliver Wyman,
That's
a
correct.
management consulting company. Yeah, so what was it like transitioning from the college life, the school life, from taking tests and everything to working at a professional company where you get paid for a specific service and all that?
Yeah. Very, very interesting question. I think any transition out of school into a job is going to be tough at first because there's an onslaught of new information and new expectations. I think Oliver Wyman did an especially good job of onboarding. So we had a training out in New York that was, I think it was almost 2 weeks, where they essentially run you through, basic problem solving skills, a lot of, technical stuff like how to do macros in Excel, things like that, and then also just client facing things. So how to interact with clients, how to set expectations well, how to present a slide deck to clients, things like that. So they did a very good job of ramping up into the role. I will say it's nice to be doing work and getting paid for it as opposed to paying the school to do work for them, but there can definitely be a lot of additional pressure because in school primarily you're doing the test and you're setting the goals for yourself. I need to get an A, I need to get whatever. uh, in work, especially in consulting, there's a lot of different stakeholders. So you have your boss who wants something from you, you have your own things that you want, your desire to do well, and then you have the clients who may be split up into three separate teams across like IT, sales, and corporate strategy, who also all want three different things from you. So it can be tough to juggle those multiple demands and expectations. Sometimes it can be a little stressful, but just takes time to get used to it.
All right, so I've never heard of Oliver Wyman personally. So what do you specifically do at the management consulting job?
Yeah, very good question. I think most people have probably never heard of it, to be honest. They may have maybe heard of like McKinsey or Bain or some of these bigger name groups, but they probably still don't know what they do. And in the typical consulting fashion, I'll give the answer that it totally depends. Project to project can vary hugely, but a lot of what I do is corporate strategy or business development work. So that can be something from a company saying, we think our stock is undervalued compared to our competitor. Help us figure out why that is and how to improve it. And then in that case, the final deliverable that you're shooting for might be a new investor deck that they can present to investors and say, this is why our stock is worth X amount, something like that. On another project, I was working for a big healthcare client recently. We were doing like claims analytics. So when your doctor, you go see your doctor or you get a surgery or something, uh, they will submit a claim to insurance, saying what the costs were and what the codes were and things before your insurance will pay out. So it was looking into that process, trying to optimize things and cut out some of the inefficiencies in the system. So a lot of variation, but consulting is great for people who want to get exposure to a lot of different industries and aren't really sure what they want to do after they're graduating school.
All right, so one of the main reasons that people want to get into a good college is to get a good education and to also show jobs that they were smart enough to get into a good college. How would you say MIT helped you in getting into Oliver Wyman?
Hmm. I would say that a lot of these firms obviously have target schools that they recruit from. So at the simplest level, I think that helped me, right? Because I was from one of the schools on the list that they recruit from, which is not, a rule, but I would say primarily a lot of the new hires do come from a select group of schools, and typically a fit kind of a profile in certain majors, engineering or STEM, whatever it might be. So that helped. I think also MIT just gave me a lot of skills and ability to distill technical concepts down to simpler terms for audiences of varying technical expertise. And that's something that I've been able to use a lot in my job. And I think that was something that came up in the interview process, especially as I was doing case interviews, being able to logically break down a problem and then present a hypothesis and analyses to back that up.
Okay, so did you have any other work experience before you went to Oliver Wyman?
Yeah, so I actually did internships while I was in college. So, like I said, the summer before I started, I worked at the Boys and Girls Club as a camp counselor. The next year, after my freshman year, what did I do? Oh, after my freshman year, I actually served a 2-year volunteer mission in Seoul, South Korea for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So I moved to Korea for 2 years and was a volunteer missionary there. So I took 2 gap years from school, came back, did my sophomore year. After that, I went back to Korea to work at the Korean Institute of Science and Technology doing machine learning research for facial and object recognition. Uh, Also, mostly just because I wanted to go back to Korea and keep the language up and see some of my friends. My junior year, after that, I worked at the Department of Defense doing Korean linguist work primarily and some other analysis. And then after my senior year, started at Oliver Wyman. So definitely bounced around a lot with the different internships and things that I did. Not a typical path into consulting.
Would you say your experience traveling in your childhood with your mom helped the transition into Korea, working in a new country and all that?
100%. Yeah. I think, especially as I saw some of the people that I served with come from relatively, not necessarily sheltered, but homogenous backgrounds. So some of my friends who were from like southern Utah, for example, in small towns, was a huge change for them going into Seoul, speaking a totally different language, 20 million people, food is completely different, you can't read any of the street signs, things like that. I think was extremely overwhelming for them. And to their credit, they adapted very well. I think it was easier for me, definitely, because I had that experience before of not knowing where I was, not being able to talk to people, and not having ever eaten any other food before. But I loved it. I mean, Korea is a great place and trying to go back as much as I can.
Would you say that your overall experience in Korea has helped you in life so far?
Absolutely, yes. I think obviously there's benefits that come from any sort of volunteer service, and it's not only rewarding personally, but I think it helps you to learn more about the people around you and to appreciate them for who they are and their unique backgrounds. So gaining an understanding of Korean culture and being exposed to the way people live their lives there, which can be very, very different from how a lot of people live in the United States, was a great opportunity. And it was awesome to be able to help these people and make a difference in their lives as well.
Yeah, after being in Korea for 2 years, I presume you can speak Korean now, right?
Yeah, not particularly well, but I can speak and read and write. So
I mean, it's better than me personally. I can only speak and read and write in two languages, and to be honest, my Spanish isn't very good, so yeah.
well, keep practicing. I'm sure it is good.
All right, so to wrap things up, my final question for you today is that do you have any advice for any high schoolers or any college kids going through the school system right now?
To be honest, I would say just try to enjoy it. At times it might seem like there's so much homework and it's overwhelming. A lot of it I remember feeling like was totally pointless. Like, why am I memorizing these random facts and things? But uh, try to enjoy the experience and realize that it'll be over sooner than you realize. And I would say if you have any interests, whether that's computers or learning Spanish or painting, whatever it might be, pursue those things. It's really important to figure out what you like and what you want to do. And that only becomes more apparent in college as you try to figure out what you're going to major in and what you're going to do for the rest of your life. So the earlier you can get a jump start on exploring some of those interests, the better.
All right, thank you so much for your time, Tavish. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, no problem. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Inspirante podcast today. Make sure to follow our Instagram at Inspirante_education, our Facebook page, and make sure to follow our Spotify as well. Thank you, and see you next time.